Coach, obviously last year Murray Bowles had a pretty big game along with BJ Mag. Just talk about the job that Michael and Keyshawn did on him in the post and really did a good job of just denying him touches altogether.
Yeah, I love his game. Got a lot of respect for him and how he competes and how he goes about his craft, just from scouting and playing against him last year. And like you mentioned, he had some big games versus us. So that was a big part of the game plan, is to really defend him inside out and just try to be as physical as we could, with them. And just they do such a good job of getting the ball to him in his spots, different spots on the court, all over, mid post, post, elbow area, and it's hard, but like we just committed to every chance that we had in this particular game to run another defender at him, and just someone might score, but it wasn't going to be him, and that was kind of the philosophy. And our kids, like you mentioned, did a really good job.
We'll go middle, second row with Sam.
Chris, the team went on a 10-0 run to close the first half, and I think all 5 of the buckets came in dunks or layups, and 3 of them came off of turnovers. Is that kind of that stretch kind of an epitome of where you think this team could be when it's playing at its best, or what it can look like at that point?
Yeah, we talked about that in different huddles this afternoon. We had the lull to start the second half, and then we kind of picked it back up, and it was because of our defense. And like you mentioned, the same thing to close the first half. When we're at our best, we're very active on the ball. We're handsy and got frenetic activity off the ball, and they're all wired and bought in. And when we are lethargic and not in stances, which obviously we've done a ton this particular season, we're just getting exposed. And so hopefully this will make them feel good about what we've been trying to preach to them, and get them to buy in even more to this particular group, so we can play that style of basketball. Obviously our offense is better, but that doesn't mean that we can't create off our defense and take some pressure off the half-court offense as well.
We'll go back left with Danny P.
Coach, 18 assists, 10 turnovers. That's, really good assist-to-turnover ratio. What is it when you share the ball like that and limit your mistakes?
Yeah, that's been something that this particular team has done a good job of. Almost every game we've had, 3 or 4 games where it hasn't been a low number in terms of percentage. We've shared the ball all year long. I mean, that's not even a big percentage for this team, 18 off of 36 baskets. But, I thought at halftime we talked to Mook specifically about overpassing. Like, you're standing underneath the goal, go score the ball, and I was like, what are we doing here? I mean, a couple of them were a little, funny at times. Not funny, but you know what I'm saying? Like, what are we doing here? But it was, I'd rather have that problem. I'd much rather have that problem than the other problem, which, I've had, and certainly some teams have, where, they're not sharing the ball and overpassing never happens. And so I'd rather fix that. But this group has shown that they're very unselfish that way.
Middle, second row with Robbie.
Coach, I talked to Keyshawn about this, but it's almost a year since he left the team and was contemplating transferring and all that stuff, and he's really bought in. You talked about it a lot before about what you want of him out of his game. What's been the biggest growth you think from last year at this point to this year that's made him so effective on both ends of the floor?
Not to be understated, but he's been healthy. Just be honest with you, that's number one, is he's never been this healthy this long since he entered college. And, he hasn't been disrupted in his growth and his work in the weight room, his work individually with the coaching staff, with his team, so that's been number one. And then, like you mentioned, he had some rough patches last year and then put his name in the portal. And I don't think we got a better recruit, no knock on anyone else, out of the portal or in the high school class than him. That was, it was stressful times for those days that he was in the portal. There was a lot of back and forth amongst the staff, as you can imagine, trying to see where we're at and how we could get him to stay with the Bulldogs. And I understood why. I mean, I did, and he believed, in it all in the end, and didn't, loved his time here and loved his teammates, and fortunately wanted to continue here and get it done here. But other than the injury deal, like I said before, he's been as consistent as anyone we've had since the day we reported in June. I mean, you can ask any one of his teammates. He just brings it every single day. He's got an unbelievable mental approach, and he just competes all the time. He just competes all the time, and it's really fun. I mean, it's like that's what every coach wants, right? You know, practice can get boring, that can get old. I get all that, but he's not shown any slowing down at all.
We'll go next to Robbie with Brian, and then we'll come up to the front row.
I'll stay with Keyshawn for a minute. When you look at his line, 12 points, 8 rebounds, 4 blocks, 3 assists, only 1 turnover. He stayed out of foul trouble. He's had better games in terms of scoring, but was this the most complete game you've seen him play?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he was flying around. You know, I don't know if you mentioned he had 4 blocks and 8 shots, so he's very efficient, and he was moving the ball. You know, he was moving the ball. He was, running offense. We ran some offense through him. It's like what I tell our guys all the time. You know, it's an old cliche, it's a phrase, but the work will eventually show up. It may not show up the next day or the next game, but if you continue to pound away, that it will surface. And he doesn't have a perfect game every day, but he's been pretty darn consistent. He has way more good games than he does not, and that's because of what he's doing when nobody's watching. And we're trying to get our team, to be like that as a group as well.
We'll go across the front row here, Benjamin.
I know the three-point defense has been a little bit of an issue at times, but in the biggest games, the Pitt game and the Memphis game, you guys have been really good, and same thing today. What were the keys in terms of just, not letting their guards get open and hit those shots?
Yeah, we had some data a few weeks ago that ranked us at the bottom of the SEC in contested threes that we've been using with our team quite a bit in the last few weeks to try to shore that up. Listen, some of it is luck. Some of it is, they just miss. But at the same time, some of it's bad luck when they make shots that are well contested. So over the course of time, it'll even out. You'll be where you need to be, or you should be, eventually. But it usually goes back to, and you hear me say this all the time, I'm like a broken record, but it usually goes back to, in that particular possession, to the point of attack and what we did or didn't do. It's usually a mistake that happened there that maybe doesn't show up for a pass or two, and then, they get a wide open look. But the last 3 or 4 games, we've been, better. Tonight obviously was really good number-wise, but even the other games, we've been getting slowly better at it.
Yeah, just what went into the first 13 minutes to where you're up, 28-6 to start conference play?
Yeah, if I knew, I'd do it every time. I don't know. They were ready to go, and we had an early morning shoot-around, and that's always a tricky decision you got to make, when you have these type of games. If it had been any earlier, probably wouldn't have done a physical shoot-around, but that's about the cutoff time, is 1 o'clock. And certainly as a coach, I love having more time to make sure we're assignment correct and game plan ready. And they were good. It started there, it was an abbreviated one, but they had a little pop to them at, 8 a.m. And, they had some energy about them, even at that point in the day, which isn't always common. And then, I don't know, they just seemed focused. We talked about that, in our Memphis game. I thought we had a different kind of focus. That was an early game, too, heading into that one, and we wanted to try to duplicate that if we could. And, I think they just got off to a good start early and then, kind of catapulted.
Go ahead, Paul.
You've talked a lot to us about how this summer defensively you knew they were built different and wouldn't be like they were built the previous couple of years. But the offense is better. When you look back at the last 4 or 5 minutes of that first half, the way your defense was fueling your offense and you just had them shook, and I know it's hard to predict, but obviously, I guess in a perfect scenario, that's how you want it to look, the way it did that last 4 or 5 minutes of the first half with your defense.
Who knows? We're going to have a lot of games to see where we're at. There's a lot of unbelievable challenges that lie ahead of us. And we're going to be playing in awesome environments against unbelievable teams. And, when you're at home and you got to lead, it's a little bit easier to play with your hair on fire. And we're going to be behind. We're going to, come out of the gates and be down big. And then, in those type of environments and situations, we'll find out if we've made any strides on that end of the floor.
Time for a few more. We'll go back to the cameras.
Yes, so how do you see this first SEC win paving the way for your season, and how do you make sure your players don't get complacent? They're excited, it's a new year, we're in SEC play. How do you make sure they keep that same drive throughout the rest of their season?
Well, I can't predict the rest of the season, but I'm pretty sure we'll keep them focused heading into a road game. It's a quick turnaround. It feels great to be 1-0. It's the first time since I've arrived that we've been 1-0 in SEC play. We've lost both of our openers in the previous 2 seasons, so that'll put a little more bounce in everybody's step. It's certainly more fun to get a chalk on the left side of the column rather than the right. And but as we know, there's a lot of basketball to be played.
Go ahead, Mitch, second row.
Coach, basketball is a lot of X and O's, but it's also a lot of mental. I asked Murph and asked Hubbard about this earlier. Talk about the mental makeup of this team and what makes this team, I know there's a lot of basketball to be played, but what makes this team a little bit more special than years past?
Well, that remains to be seen if they're going to be more special than years past, but they got a connection. We noticed it this summer. You kind of keep your fingers crossed when it comes to that, and you never know how it unfolds, but they just seemed that there was a nice just flow of our current of how they interacted with each other. Like, for example, we're coming down at halftime this game, right? And Delquan's ahead of Riley, and I just happen to be behind him, and we're walking into our tunnel area there before the locker room, and Riley was like jumping up and down on Delquan's shoulders. And Riley didn't do much at all in the first half, but he was so excited for Delquan for getting into the game and being positive with his play. And that isn't always the case. When someone doesn't play well, they kind of, look inside and, feel sorry for themselves. And, and so for a kid like that to do that to a freshman, I didn't smile outwardly, but I did inwardly and going, hell yeah. And so just things like that, they add up. And this team, they root for one another. But at the same time, we've got really good leadership, with Cam Matthews willing to open his mouth and have some player accountability that way when it's required is a nice luxury in this day and age. And certainly Josh Hubbard, has found his voice as well. So we've got, overall, I really like the makeup of the type of guys that we got, and we've got that leadership. And now, they're rooting for one another, which is always good.
Sam, second row middle, wrap us up.
Yeah, and kind of similar to that question is, you've played a handful of games against some top opponents, Pitt, Memphis, South Carolina today, and the team always seems to play its best in those moments. But why do you think it kind of is that this group is rising to the occasion when it's needed at those times?
I don't know. I'm glad they have, and it's like one of the questions earlier. We got a lot of opportunities and challenges to find out if that's how they're going to be all year long, because we're going to have a lot of challenges and big games, and hopefully that will continue. Hopefully that will be, something special about this team, but we're nowhere near knowing if that's going to be the case.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.